Hi everyone! Welcome to Tangerine Planet, a place for kind thoughts, smart ideas, and a little sunshine for the world. Let's make a difference, one step at a time, together.
Okay, so you've gathered this really fascinating stack of sources for us today.
Yeah.
We're looking into something quite subtle, almost hidden, how air pollution is, well, messing with this crucial link between flowers and the insects that pollinate them.
That's right. We've got research papers, detailed analyses, field notes. It really takes us deep into the chemistry of scent, but also into the amazing navigation skills of these tiny creatures.
And it kicks off with something that sounds deceptively simple. Scientists working very gently with the bee.
Yeah, exactly. They carefully hold it, they puff a specific flower aroma towards its antenna, and then immediately give it a little reward, like a drop of sugar water.
And they do this a few times. Puff, reward, reward.
Just 3 or 4 rounds usually does it. And then the really cool part happens.
Which is?
That the next time that bee just smells that same aroma, even without the immediate reward, its little mouth part, the proboscis, just automatically extends. It's anticipating the sugar.
Okay. So it's learned the connection. Smell equals food. It's like the bee version of Pavlov's dog, you could say.
It really is. A classic conditioned response, showing how well these insects can learn associations. But, like you hinted, this technique isn't just about, seeing if bees can learn. It's become a critical tool.
A tool for understanding a much bigger and actually quite serious problem that's happening out there, largely unseen.
Exactly. It helps researchers get a handle on this invisible disruption.
Right. Because the core issue we're diving into today is that this fundamental communication system, something plants and pollinators have relied on for, well, millions of years, is breaking down.
And it's air pollution that's causing it, something we usually think about in terms of, say, lung health or maybe climate change.
But it's actually having this profound effect on how pollinators find their food source, the flowers. It's like static on the line for their most important scents.
Precisely. That medium they navigate through, the air itself, is being chemically changed by us, by human activity. And these changes distort the signals, the scents, creating this invisible barrier.
So for this deep dive, our mission is really to unpack the science here. We need to get into how this communication breakdown is actually happening chemically.
Yeah, we'll explore the chemistry of the flower scents themselves, look at how specific pollutants, things like ground-level ozone and nitrate radicals, how they physically degrade these scent signals.
And we'll look at the research raft.
Yeah.
The studies that are trying to figure out just how big this problem is.
Definitely. And importantly, we'll also explore some potential solutions. Some are quite surprising, actually, from, trying to retrain the bees themselves.
Retrain the bees, wow.
To thinking differently about how we manage entire landscapes. So the goal is to pull out the key insights from these sources, the nuggets you need to really understand this environmental challenge. Let's unpack it.
Okay. So at its core, this is about an invisible barrier. Pollution in the air disrupting the chemical messages flowers send out.
Exactly. Researchers like Robbie Gerling and his team have shown pretty clearly that air pollution really changes how pollinators perceive these flower scents. And it's not just a minor thing for them.
No, it sounds like it hits right at the heart of their survival strategy. This communication system is fundamental.
It absolutely is. Built over millennia of evolution. And now it's being fundamentally disrupted.
It sounds incredibly complex, though. I mean, how do scientists even start to study something like that? An invisible chemical change affecting insect behavior.
Well, they use carefully controlled experiments. They try to mimic what's happening in the real world, but in the lab where they can isolate variables. Gerling's team, for instance, has done a lot of work simulating polluted air.
Specifically with ground-level ozone.
Yeah, that's been a major focus. Ground-level ozone, it's the smoggy stuff.
Right, the stuff that forms when pollutants from cars and industry cook in the sunlight. Not directly emitted, but formed in the air.
Exactly, a secondary pollutant. And when Gerling's team takes specific plant scents, the actual chemical compounds, and releases them into air containing realistic levels of this ozone, well, the results for the bees are pretty stark.
What did they find?
In a 2023 study they published, it was really striking. Most of the honeybees they tested simply couldn't recognize the scents anymore once they'd been exposed to ozone.
Couldn't recognize them at all.
For the most part, no. And it's not just that the pollution is like masking the smell. The ozone is actually chemically reacting with the scent molecules. It's breaking them down, changing them into different chemicals.
So the smell of the flower literally becomes something else chemically.
Precisely. The original scent signature is destroyed or altered.
The sources gave some pretty vivid examples, like ozone making lavender smell sour.
Yeah, developing sour notes. That's a direct result of the ozonolysis reaction changing the original fragrant compounds in the lavender scent.
And another example was eucalyptus, potentially starting to smell like orchids.
Right. Again, to us, maybe that just sounds weird. But think about an insect.
Yeah, if you're an insect that relies only on that very specific eucalyptus scent to find your food, or maybe your host plant to lay eggs.
And suddenly it smells completely different, maybe even like something else entirely.
It's not just interesting. It's a huge problem for survival. The beacon's broken.
Exactly. They can't find their target. And to get a sense of how widespread this is beyond just one lab or one scent, Gerling and his colleagues did this big meta-analysis in 2024.
Okay, a meta-analysis means they looked at lots of existing studies together.
A huge number, actually. They synthesized the findings from 120 different publications covering research done in 19 countries, so it gives a much broader, more global picture.
That sounds really comprehensive.
Yeah.
And the headline numbers from that analysis were, well, they were pretty concerning.
They really were. Overall, looking across all these studies, they found that exposure to ozone pollution reduced the performance of beneficial invertebrates. That includes pollinators like bees, but also other helpful insects like parasitoids that control pests by over 31%.
More than 31% decrease in performance. Wow.
Yeah. And for another major pollutant, nitrogen oxides, or NACX. The stuff that comes mainly from burning fossil fuels in cars and power plants that decrease their performance by 24%.
So their ability to do their jobs, basically pollinating, controlling pests, is significantly knocked back by these common pollutants.
That's what the combined evidence strongly suggests.
And the researchers think this is mostly because the insects are just having a harder time finding food because the smells are messed up.
That's the leading explanation, yeah. It seems the most likely reason for these performance drops is that they're struggling to locate nectar and pollen efficiently because those scent trails are degraded or confused.
And that directly impacts pollination, which connects to us.
Directly. The source material quotes Jeffrey Reffel, an ecologist who studies this, pointing out that something like 3/4 of the world's main food crops depend on animal pollination to some extent.
3/4. That is a huge chunk of our food system relying on these pollinators.
It really is. So if pollination is less effective because the pollinators are confused, that can lead straight to lower crop yields. Reffel puts it really powerfully. Messing with these tiny creatures disturbing their world can have these really profound knock-on effects for human well-being, for our food security.
It just highlights how interconnected everything is. Tiny chemical changes in the air, big consequences on our dinner plates.
Absolutely, and that's why understanding this is so critical.
Okay, so to really get why this disruption is such a big deal, we need to appreciate just how important smell is for these insects in the first place. It's their primary way of sensing the world over distances, isn't it?
For many pollinators, yes, absolutely. Jeffrey Reffel stresses that their sense of smell, their olfaction, is often much, much better than their eyesight for finding flowers, especially if the flowers are far away.
How far are we talking? Like across a field?
Sometimes much further. The sources mention that some insects, depending on conditions, can potentially detect a promising patch of flowers from up to 1 kilometer away, just by smell.
1 kilometer? That's incredible. Navigating purely by scent over that kind of distance.
It really is a different sensory world.
And it's not like they're just smelling one simple thing, right? Like flower smell. It's more complex.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly sophisticated. Think about how we recognize the smell of a rose. It's not just one chemical, it's a whole blend. Insects do the same, but often with even greater sensitivity. They recognize a specific flower by its unique chemical cocktail, the specific mix of compounds, or even the exact ratios of those compounds.
Reffel described it as smelling hundreds of chemicals all at the same time.
Yeah, and their brains instantly process that complex input into a recognizable signature for, say, a specific type of clover versus a thistle.
Which brings us to these things called volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. These are the chemicals that make up the scent.
Exactly. Plants release thousands of different VOCs from their leaves, roots, flowers. Flowers alone are estimated to release hundreds, maybe thousands of different types. We currently know of about 1,700 specific floral volatile compounds, and scientists are discovering more all the time.
And the sources mention some key chemical groups that are particularly important for floral scents.
Yes, the main players are often things called benzenoids, fatty acid derivatives, and crucially for this pollution story, a group called terpenes and terpenoids. These are often the compounds that give flowers their most characteristic and attractive smells.
Can you give some examples? Names we might recognize.
Sure. The sources list things like linalool that often smells sweet, maybe a bit floral or citrusy, found in lavender and many other flowers. Limon, that's very citrusy, like in lemons and oranges, but also present in some flower scents. And myrcene, that can be more spicy, herbal, or woody. These are just a few common building blocks of floral perfumes.
And Ben Langford, one of the atmospheric scientists involved, he had a good analogy for what these VOCs do.
Yeah, he called them beacons.
Beacons,
Yeah.
like a lighthouse signal.
Exactly. He says flowers use these plumes of chemicals drifting in the air as signals, as calls to insects, advertising, hey, nectar and pollen over here. It's their way of communicating their presence across distances.
And figuring out exactly which chemicals make up a specific flower's beacon involves some pretty clever scientific work, like the methods James Bland's team uses.
Right. It's meticulous stuff. They might put special bags over flowers right there in the field or greenhouse to trap the air around them and collect the VOCs being released.
And then take that air sample back to the lab.
Yeah, and analyze it using techniques like gas chromatography linked with mass spectrometry. GCMS is the shorthand. This basically lets them separate out every single chemical component in that complex scent mixture and identify what each one is, molecule by molecule. That's how they build up the scent profile of a plant.
Okay, so we've got this amazing natural system. Flowers broadcasting complex chemical beacons, mainly terpenes and pollinators, navigating by these precise scent signatures, sometimes over huge distances. But the problem, the core of our discussion, is that these signals are really vulnerable.
They really are, and it comes down to the chemistry, specifically how these pollutants react with the scent molecules in the air.
And you mentioned terpenes are particularly susceptible. Why is that?
It's mainly because of their chemical structure. Many terpenes have something called carbon double bonds.
Double bonds. Okay, so that's a specific feature of the molecule.
Yes, and these double bonds are like reactive hotspots. They're particularly prone to being attacked or broken by oxidizing agents in the atmosphere, especially ozone, O3, and also nitrate radicals, NO3.
Interestingly, the sources say this reactivity wasn't always a bad thing. It had a role before widespread pollution.
That's a fascinating point. In the pre-industrial atmosphere, there were natural background levels of ozone and other radicals. When a flower released its scent, these natural oxidants would gradually break down the scent molecules as they drifted further away.
So the scent naturally faded with distance.
Exactly. Which was actually helpful. It meant the signal was strongest right near the flower, helping the insect pinpoint the source accurately. It prevented the scent from lingering too long or traveling too far and creating confusion. Langford explained that natural ozone had its own cycle of being created and destroyed, keeping levels relatively low and stable.
But human activity has completely thrown that natural balance out of whack.
Completely. We've pumped enormous amounts of pollutants into the air that act as precursors for ground-level ozone formation. Primarily nitrogen oxides from burning fossil fuels, and huge quantities of VOCs, not just the natural ones from plants, but anthropogenic VOCs.
Those are the ones from human sources.
Yeah, things like industrial processes, vehicle exhaust, evaporating solvents, gasoline fumes, the list goes on. These artificial VOCs react with NOx in sunlight to produce much, much higher levels of ground-level ozone than would ever occur naturally.
And the increase has been dramatic. The sources mentioned going from maybe 5 to 15 parts per billion, ppb, pre-industrially.
Who now having annual averages in the northern hemisphere mid-latitudes of maybe 20 to 45 ppb, so a doubling or tripling of the baseline average.
And on bad days, it gets much worse.
Oh, yeah. During heat waves or in polluted cities, the levels can spike dramatically. The source mentioned potential peaks over 200 ppb in places like Athens.
200 ppb. Compared to a natural background of maybe 15 ppc max, that's a massive increase.
It's huge. And all this extra ozone, this human-caused ozone, is now attacking those floral scent molecules, especially the terpenes, much more aggressively and breaking them down far more quickly than they ever would have naturally.
The 2024 study by Grilling and Langford really dug into the chemistry of that breakdown, the ozonolysis.
Yes, they focused on how ozone targets that carbon double bond in terpenes. Langford described it quite simply as the area easiest to crack open.
So ozone breaks the molecule at that point.
Essentially, yes. It initiates a chain reaction that shatters the original terpene molecule and creates a whole bunch of new, smaller chemical fragments. These are often things like carbonyls, carboxylic acids, maybe some alcohols and esters.
So the original signal molecule is gone, replaced by this chemical noise.
That's a great way to put it. Langford himself said these byproducts introduce more noise into the system. The pollinator is searching for that specific evolved scent signature, but it's being drowned out or replaced by this jumble of breakdown products that don't mean food to the insect. It causes confusion.
Okay, so we understand the chemistry now. Pollution breaks down the scents, creates noise. The next big question for the scientists was, what does this actually mean for the pollinators out in the world? How does it affect their behavior, the plants, the whole ecosystem?
Right, moving from the lab bench to the real-world implications. And researchers are using various methods to track these consequences. One key finding is that different scent chemicals react differently.
Some break down faster than others.
Exactly. Some VOCs are highly reactive with ozone and might only last minutes in polluted air. Others are less reactive and might linger for hours.
And that difference matters.
It matters a lot. A modeling study from 2016 showed that because of this differential degradation in polluted air, the most reactive compounds basically disappear very close to the flower. The less reactive ones can travel further, maybe a quarter-mile downwind, according to the model.
So the smell of the flower literally changes its chemical makeup depending on how far away you are.
Precisely. The blend of chemicals and insect smells right next to the flower is very different from the blend it smells even 50 meters away. This makes navigating towards the source using that scent incredibly difficult.
So let's use that fruit analogy again here.
Yeah, the orange smelling like a lemon from a distance. If you're a bee expecting orange and you suddenly get lemon, you're probably not going to follow that signal. It's disorienting.
And lab experiments have confirmed this disorientation, right?
Yeah.
Like that study using the arena with the paper flowers.
Yes, the one by the Spanish and Finnish researchers. They set up that cylinder, put fake black mustard flowers at each end, and pumped either clean air, the original black mustard scent, or ozone-degraded mustard scent behind them.
And then let bumblebees choose.
Exactly, one bee at a time. And the results were really clear. Bees went straight for the original unpolluted scent. But when offered the choice between clean air and the heavily degraded scent,
They couldn't choose.
they basically couldn't. They seemed confused. Neither option was attractive or recognizable as the food signal they were looking for. The pollution had effectively broken that scent recognition link.
Okay, so that shows the effect up close. But what about those longer distances pollinators travel? How do you study that?
That's where things like wind tunnels become really useful. Langford, Gerling, and their colleagues use the specialized research tunnel. It's about 20 meters long.
The source called it an oversized shipping container.
That gives you a good idea. Inside, they can precisely control the air, the wind speed, the pollutant levels. They couldn't use real flowers, obviously. They'd wilt. So they carefully recreated the flower scents using mixtures of the purer chemicals.
And then pumped these recreated scents into the tunnel with ozone.
Right. And they sampled the air at many points down the length of the tunnel to see exactly how the scent plume changed chemically as it traveled through the ozone-polluted air.
Did they find anything unexpected beyond just the chemicals breaking down?
They did. The chemical degradation happened as expected, but they also discovered that the ozone was changing the actual physical shape of the scent plumes.
The shape? How does this smell normally travel? What does this shape look like?
Well, scents don't usually spread out as a smooth, uniform cloud. Gerling explained it's more like cigarette smoke. It travels in these twisting filaments or tendrils. Some bits are more concentrated, some less so.
And insects follow these tendrils.
Exactly. They're incredibly good at detecting these faint wisps of scent. When they catch one, they use it to orient themselves and fly upwind, zigzagging to stay within the strongest part of the filament, tracking it back to the source. It's amazing olfactory navigation.
But pollution messes with these filaments.
The wind tunnel work showed that ozone makes these individual scent filaments narrower. And importantly, it also makes the overall plume, the whole collection of filaments, narrower too.
So the trail itself becomes thinner and harder to detect and follow.
That seems to be the implication. Even if there's some detectable scent left, if the plume structure is disrupted, if it's narrower and less defined, it could be much harder for the insect to lock onto and navigate accurately back to the flower. The beacon is not only chemically scrambled, but also physically harder to track.
Okay, so lab work, wind tunnels, they show the mechanisms. But the crucial question is, does this hold up outside, in the messy real world?
And the evidence says, yes, it does. There was a field study published in 2025, also led by Gerling's group. They set up plots of black mustard plants out in a field. Some plots had controlled amounts of ozone pumped over them, while control plots just had the normal ambient air.
And they just counted how many pollinators visited each plot.
Pretty much, yeah. They carefully observed and recorded pollinator visits.
And the difference was significant.
Very significant. The plots exposed to the added ozone got 37% fewer visits from pollinators compared to the unpolluted control plots. A direct, real-world reduction in pollination activity linked to ozone.
37% fewer visits is huge.
It is, and it got even worse when they simulated the kind of pollution cocktail you'd find near a busy road.
Adding diesel exhaust fumes to the mix.
Exactly. When they combined ozone with diesel exhaust, pollinator visits to the mustard plants dropped by almost half compared to the clean air sites. That really underscores how multiple pollutants working together can have an even bigger negative impact.
And this isn't just a daytime problem affecting bees and flies active in sunlight when ozone forms. The pollution issue extends into the night as well.
That's another really important piece of the puzzle. Ozone is the main issue during the day because its formation needs sunlight, but at night another pollutant takes over, the nitrate radical, written as NO3.
Why is that one only a problem at night?
Because, as Gerling explained, sunlight destroys it very quickly through photolysis, so it simply can't build up during the day. But once the sun sets, and if the precursor pollutants like nitrogen oxides are still around, which they often are, especially near cities or roads, NO3 can form and accumulate in the night air.
And it also reacts with floral scents.
Yes, it's also a strong oxidant and readily attacks those vulnerable VOCs, degrading the scents put out by night-blooming flowers. And for nocturnal pollinators, smell is arguably even more critical than for daytime ones, navigating in darkness.
Like the hawkmoths studied by Jeffrey Riffel's group, pollinating things like evening primrose.
Exactly. Riffel's team looked specifically at this. Hawkmoths are amazing nocturnal pollinators, crucial for plants like the pale evening primrose.
And did the nitrate radicals affect the primrose scent?
Dramatically. They found that exposing the primrose flowers to realistic nighttime levels of NO3 caused huge reductions in key scent chemicals. For example, woodpine, which gives a piney smell, was reduced by 84%. Another one, boasimony, more woody, dropped by 67%.
Well, 84% reduction, so the scent is just getting wiped out.
Pretty much. The unique chemical signature that the hawkmoths rely on to find the primrose in the dark is being severely degraded by this nighttime pollutant.
And just like the daytime studies, this chemical change had real ecological consequences.
Yes. The researchers observed fewer hawkmoths actually visiting the primrose flowers exposed to NO3 compared to the unpolluted ones. Fewer visits mean less pollen transfer, less successful pollination. Riffel explicitly links this to reduced plant fitness. The plants produce fewer viable seeds, impacting their ability to reproduce and maintain their populations over time.
So the picture emerging from all this research is pretty clear and frankly quite worrying. Air pollution, both ozone by day and nitrate radicals by night, is chemically scrambling the scent signals that pollinators absolutely depend on. It's making it harder for them to find food, which in turn hurts the plant's ability to reproduce.
That's the unfortunate reality the science is revealing.
Given how serious this seems, are researchers looking at ways to help the pollinators cope? Can anything be done?
That's definitely the next frontier. And there are some intriguing possibilities being explored. One line of research suggests that maybe, just maybe, some pollinators could learn to adapt.
Learn to recognize the polluted smells.
Potentially, yes. Some studies hint that certain species might be able to form new associations, learning that these altered scents still lead to a food reward.
And the idea for this comes from farming. The sources mentioned a surprisingly long history of people training bees.
It's really fascinating. Apparently, farmers were training honeybees way back before World War II to try and boost crop pollination.
How did they do that?
The basic method was to feed the bees sugar syrup inside the hive, but they'd add the scent of the specific crop flower they wanted the bees to visit, say, apple blossom fragrance.
So the bees learn apple smell equals sugar treat.
Exactly. Then, when those bees flew out to forage, the theory was they'd preferentially seek out the actual apple blossoms because they'd already associated that smell with food. And apparently, variations of this are still used successfully by some beekeepers today.
So Rough researchers are now wondering if you could use a similar idea for the pollution problem. Train them to, like, the degraded sense.
That's precisely the idea some teams are testing. Can we essentially rewire them using those same principles of associative learning to seek out scents that have been altered by ozone or other pollutants? It's like Girling's initial bee training, but using the polluted scent instead of the original.
Has anyone actually managed to do that? Train an insect to respond positively to a pollution-altered scent?
Yes, there has been some success. A 2020 study managed to train hawkmoths, those nighttime pollinators we talked about.
Okay, what do they do?
An international team used artificial flowers, mimicking a plant called jasmine tobacco. These fake flowers released scents that had been deliberately exposed to ozone, and crucially, the fake flowers also contained a sugar reward.
So, teaching the moths, this weird ozone change smell means food.
Exactly. They were building that new association. And it worked. The trained hawk moths were significantly more eager to approach and extend their proboscis towards these degraded scents compared to moths that hadn't received the training.
That's pretty cool. It shows it's possible, at least for some species.
It demonstrates the potential, yes, that learning and adaptation might offer some resilience.
But I imagine it's not that simple. There must be challenges with this retraining idea in the real world.
Oh, definitely. While the hawk moth study is promising, there are major hurdles to applying this broadly. A really big one is that the polluted scent isn't a fixed thing.
Right, you mentioned it changes depending on distance and time of day.
Exactly. The chemical mix is constantly shifting in polluted air. It changes as you move away from the flower. It changes as daily pollution patterns fluctuate, as sunlight changes, temperature changes. So what exactly do you train the insect to recognize? The scent profile it learns in one situation might be totally different an hour later or 10 meters further away.
It's like trying to learn a language that's constantly changing its vocabulary, a moving target.
That's a great analogy. It makes forming a reliable learned association incredibly difficult.
Are there other limitations besides the changing sense?
A huge one is just biological variation between species. Not all insects learn the same way or rely on learning for foraging to the same extent. Magali Prophet, the ecologist who studies fig wasps, makes this point very clearly.
Yes, the fig wasps. Tell us about them again.
They're fascinating. They're the only pollinators for Mediterranean fig trees, and their whole life cycle is incredibly short and specialized, tied completely to finding and entering a fig. Prophet's work showed that, yes, these wasps get confused by ozone-polluted fig scent. They stop recognizing it.
But they can't be trained to recognize the polluted version.
No. As Prophet puts it, they live less than 24 hours, and their one goal is to find a fig. There's been no evolutionary pressure for them to develop flexible learning abilities for foraging. It's just not part of their strategy.
So they get confused by the pollution, and that's it. No time or ability to adapt within their lifespan.
Pretty much. For species like that, retraining just isn't an option. Their biology isn't set up for it.
Okay, so training might help some species, but definitely not all. What about other ideas? The sources mentioned maybe breeding plants with stronger smells, or even genetic engineering.
That's another avenue being considered. Could we breed or engineer plants to produce, say, much higher quantities of their natural scent compounds? Or maybe even compounds that are inherently less reactive to ozone or nitrate radicals?
Making the beacon louder or more robust to interference.
Essentially, yes. Make the signal stronger or tougher so it cuts through the noise of pollution more effectively.
Has that kind of thing been done before with plants, modifying scents?
Oh, yes. Plant breeding and genetic modification have definitely been used to alter scents and flavors in crops like tomatoes, or enhance the fragrance of flowers like carnations. Usually it's been done for human preferences, better taste, nicer smell in a vase.
Not specifically to help pollinators navigate pollution.
Generally not, no. But the tools exist. James Bland referred to these ideas as fascinating, so the scientific potential is recognized.
But Bland, and also Ben Langford, seem to suggest there might be simpler, maybe more practical approaches.
They did. Their perspective tends towards ecological solutions. Bland essentially argues that while training insects or engineering plants are interesting possibilities, perhaps the most realistic way to address this is by changing how we manage the environments pollinators live in, especially agricultural areas.
How so? What needs to change in the environment?
Their main point is that in many modern landscapes, flowers are just too hard for pollinators to find anyway, even without pollution. Langford paints that picture of the countryside being Very green, but there are not a lot of flowers.
He means the huge fields of single crops,
Yeah.
monocultures.
Exactly. Vast stretches of corn or wheat or soy with maybe just small, isolated patches of wildflowers in between or far away in hedgerows.
Which forces the pollinators to rely heavily on that long-distance smell navigation to find those isolated patches.
Precisely. They have to use long-range scent cues to cross those big flowerless gaps.
And that's exactly the kind of navigation that pollution messes up the most.
Right. So the argument from researchers like Bland and Langford is, let's make the flowers easier to find in the first place. Let's change the landscape structure.
How? By planting more flowers closer together.
That's the core idea. Integrate more pollinator-friendly flower resources within the agricultural landscape. Plant diverse flower strips alongside or even within crop fields. Beef up hedgerows. Create buffer zones rich in flowers.
So reduce the distance pollinators need to travel between food sources.
Exactly. If flower patches are closer together and more abundant, pollinators might rely more on shorter range cues, maybe even visual cues, and be less dependent on navigating those long, pollution-degraded scent plumes across vast distances. It's about making the landscape itself more navigable for them.
It makes sense. A more ecological approach focusing on habitat structure.
It seems potentially more scalable and broadly applicable than trying to retrain countless individual insects or re-engineer every important plant species.
Okay, so we've explored the problem, the mechanisms, the impacts, and some potential solutions ranging from high-tech to habitat restoration. But it feels crucial to put this whole issue of pollution confusing pollinators into the bigger picture.
Absolutely critical, because pollinators are facing a whole battery of threats already. Air pollution isn't happening in isolation.
The sources were clear on that. This is one more pressure on top of others.
Right. We know pollinators are already dealing with things like pesticides, the huge effects of climate change altering habitat and when flowers bloom, plus new diseases and parasites spreading. It's a tough world out there for them.
And the overall population trends are pretty grim.
Sadly, yes. The statistics mentioned are alarming. North American bumblebee populations down almost 50% since the mid-1970s. In Europe, something like 1 out of every 10 bee and butterfly species is facing extinction.
Those are stark numbers. Shows populations already under immense strain.
Exactly. Many species are struggling just to hang on. And into this already difficult situation, we now add air pollution, actively hindering their ability to find food and reproduce. Ben Langford put it perfectly.
What did he say?
He said air pollution is definitely not the sole reason for the overall decline, but it is an added stress on an already very stressed system. It's just making a bad situation worse.
Right. Okay, so let's just quickly recap the journey we've taken in this deep dive. We started with the amazing importance of scent for pollinators. It's their long-distance guide to food, like navigating by complex perfumes.
Then we got into the chemistry. How common air pollutants, ozone by day, nitrate radicals by night, are chemically attacking these scent molecules, breaking them down, creating noise, essentially scrambling the signals flowers send out.
We saw how researchers are tracking this lab tests, showing bees getting confused, wind tunnels revealing how pollution warps the very shape of scent trails, making them harder to follow. And crucially, field studies confirming this leads to far fewer pollinators actually reaching the flowers in polluted areas.
Then we explored potential ways to help. The idea of retraining insects like hawkmoths shows some promise, but faces big hurdles like the constantly changing nature of pollution and the fact many insects just can't learn that way, like the fig wasps.
We also touched on breeding or engineering plants with stronger or more resistant scents, but contrasted that with maybe simpler, broader ecological approaches like redesigning landscapes, especially farmland, to have more flowers closer together, reducing the need for that vulnerable long-distance scent navigation.
And finally, we situated this whole problem. Air pollution is a serious, scientifically proven stressor, adding yet another burden onto pollinator populations already facing steep declines globally due to pesticides, climate change, and disease. It's one more factor pushing these vital species closer to the edge.
It really makes you think. Scent is this fundamental, invisible language for so much of the natural world, not just finding food, but finding mates, avoiding predators, choosing habitats. This deep dive focused on the plant-pollinator connection, but it raises a much broader, maybe unsettling question for all of us, doesn't it?
What's that?
Well, if air pollution is quietly disrupting this vital, unseen chemical conversation, what other crucial interactions in nature, other communication systems we don't even notice, are also being scrambled by the changing chemistry of our air? And what are the long-term ripple effects of those disruptions going to be?
Thanks for being with us today. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and tap the bell to keep the good vibes going. Let's join into healing our little world one step at a time, together. And all this is Tangerine Planet. Until next time.